Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This video uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today we're diving deep into On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder. It's this guide to recognizing and resisting threats to democratic values. And it just feels incredibly relevant right now with everything going on.
Absolutely.
What makes this book so fascinating is that it uses 20th century European history to help us understand the political anxieties that we're seeing today.
It really is like looking in a mirror. I mean, we tend to think we're immune to repeating the past, but Snyder shows us how those echoes are all around us. Take his concept of anticipatory obedience, for example.
Yeah.
He argues that people start conforming to a repressive regime's assumed desires even before they're forced to.
It's a subtle but incredibly powerful. Have you ever found yourself online agreeing with a popular opinion, even if you had doubts?
Mm-hmm.
That's anticipatory obedience in action. It can signal to those in power what people are willing to tolerate. And it just paves the way for authoritarianism.
It's almost like we're pre-programming ourselves for oppression.
Right, and that reminds me of the Milgram experiment, where the results were shocking. Ordinary people were willing to inflict pain on others.
Yeah.
Just because an authority figure told them to.
Exactly. The Milgram experiment really shows the power of authority, and Snyder connects this to historical examples, like Nazi Germany's annexation of Austria. Many Austrians actually accepted Nazi ideology even before the troops arrived, which made the takeover so much easier.
So it's not just about blind obedience then. It's about the institutions that we rely on. Snyder's really adamant about defending courts, newspapers, laws, even unions. He sees them as essential for preserving a decent society.
Yeah, he's right. These institutions provide checks and balances against abuses of power, but they are vulnerable unless they are actively defended. And Snyder uses the complacency of some German Jews amidst the Nazi rise to power as a cautionary tale. They put their faith in a system that was already being undermined.
So complacency can be just as dangerous as outright oppression. We can't just assume that these safeguards will always be there. We have to be active in protecting them.
Precisely. Freedom is not something we inherit. It's something that we have to fight for, generation after generation.
Which leads us to Snyder's warning about the dangers of a one-party state right. The more power a single party has, the more tempted they are to abuse it.
It's not even just about temptation. It's about the suppression of opposing viewpoints and the erosion of democratic norms. Snyder uses examples of how European democracies fell to fascism, Nazism, or communism. It was often through a combination of elections and coups, with single parties exploiting historical moments to just dominate political life.
So we need to be wary of any political party, regardless of its ideology, that tries to monopolize power. That means supporting a multi-party system and defending the rules of democratic elections.
Absolutely. Every vote matters, not just in national elections, but in local and state elections as well. It's about actively participating in the democratic process at all levels.
This next part really struck me. Snyder emphasizes the power of symbols and everyday choices. He has that chilling line, "The symbols of today enable the reality of tomorrow."
Yeah. It's a powerful reminder that our actions, even those that seem insignificant, can have a ripple effect. Think about the acceptance of propaganda posters or wearing symbols of loyalty. Seemingly small acts can pave the way for larger atrocities.
It's like the saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. We need to be mindful of our choices and how they might contribute to a dangerous trend.
And that includes recognizing the importance of professionals, lawyers, judges, doctors, upholding ethical standards, even when pressured to compromise them.
That's a tough one, though. It's easy to say, well, I was just following orders. But at some point, personal responsibility has to kick in.
Absolutely. And Snyder connects this to the role of paramilitaries in eroding democratic order. And it's not just a historical phenomenon. We see concerns about private security forces and the blurring lines between official and unofficial armed groups, even today.
So it sounds like we need to be wary of anyone who claims to be above the law, regardless of whether they wear a uniform. But what can we do as individuals when faced with these enormous systemic issues?
Well, Snyder argues for individual action and truth-telling. He uses the example of Winston Churchill standing up to the Nazis when many were ready to appease them. There's also the story of Teresa Prokhorova, who risked her life to help Jews escape the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II.
Those are powerful examples of individuals making a difference, even when it seemed like the whole world was against them. But their courage can feel daunting for everyday people like us.
I think that's the point Snyder's trying to make. We don't all have to be heroes. But we can all make choices that align with our values, even when it's difficult.
Especially in a world of information overload and disinformation, which is where his warnings about language, truth, and the internet come in. He talks about how easy it is to get caught up in the spectacle and lose sight of what's actually true. That feels very relevant in today's 24/7 news cycle and social media echo chambers.
Yeah. Snyder argues that we need to develop critical thinking skills, be wary of emotionally charged language, and investigate information before accepting it as truth.
It's like knowledge is power, but it also comes with a responsibility. We can't blindly accept everything we're told. We need to do the work of figuring things out for ourselves.
And part of that work involves building resilience through connection and action, which is another key theme in the book.
So it's not just about being informed, it's about being engaged with our communities and being willing to stand up for what we believe in.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're not just isolated individuals, but part of a larger social fabric.
And by doing so, we can help prevent tyranny from taking root.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. What would you say is like the absolute key takeaway from On Tyranny?
I think it's this. Individuals have the power to recognize and resist tyranny, even in seemingly small ways, by acting courageously and defending democratic values. We can make a real difference.
I love that. It's a message of hope, even in the face of some pretty dark historical realities.
It is. Snyder doesn't shy away from the horrors of the 20th century, but he also shows us that there were people who resisted, who stood up for what they believed in, and who made a difference. And their stories serve as an inspiration for us today.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into On Tyranny. If you're feeling inspired to learn more, I highly recommend checking out the book.
Yeah, it's a short read, packed with insights, incredibly relevant to our times.
We've included a link in the description where you can purchase it. It's one of those books I think everyone should have on their shelf. And hey, while you're down there, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to Mindful Moments for more thought-provoking content like this. We're taking a break from new content creation for a few weeks, but we've got some exciting ideas brewing, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. Until next time, keep those minds sharp.
Keep them sharp. And that brings us to one of Snyder's more practical points. He talks about corporeal politics, the importance of physical presence and action in resisting tyranny.
So it's not just about thinking the right thoughts. It's about getting out there and actually doing something.
Exactly. He suggests these simple actions like making eye contact with people, engaging in small talk, participating in protests or community events, and contributing to causes you believe in.
That's interesting because it goes against the whole online activism trend where people think that like retweeting something is enough to make a difference.
Right. Snyder argues that physical presence matters. He draws parallels to historical movements, like the Solidarity movement in Poland, where people took to the streets and demanded change.
Okay, so we've got to be mindful of our choices, defend our institutions, engage in corporeal politics. It's a lot to process. But what happens when we're bombarded with so much information that we can't even tell what's true anymore?
That's where Snyder's warnings about information overload and disinformation come in. He specifically calls out the dangers of accepting truth without critical examination. He urges us to investigate the information we consume, to be wary of emotionally charged language, and to remain calm in the face of potential crises.
It's like he's saying, don't just react, think. We're living in a world where anyone can publish anything online.
Yeah.
And it can be hard to separate fact from fiction.
He uses examples from history and modern politics to illustrate how propaganda and disinformation campaigns work. Think about the tactics used by totalitarian regimes in the 20th century. They often relied on controlling the narrative, spreading misinformation, and silencing dissent.
And those same tactics are being used today, just with different tools.
Exactly. Social media platforms, while powerful tools for connection, can also be used to spread propaganda and manipulate public opinion.
So what can we do about it? How do we navigate this world of information overload and disinformation?
Well, Snyder encourages us to cultivate critical thinking skills. Don't just take things at face value. Ask questions. Consider different perspectives, and be wary of information that's designed to evoke strong emotional responses.
It sounds like he's advocating for a more skeptical approach to the information we consume.
Precisely. He also stresses the importance of diversifying our information sources. Don't rely on just one news outlet or social media platform. Expose yourself to a range of viewpoints.
That's good advice. It's easy to get stuck in an echo chamber where everyone agrees with you. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're getting the full picture.
Exactly. He even encourages people to step away from the internet entirely. and read books, which he sees as a way to develop a broader perspective.
Okay, so be skeptical, diversify your sources, and read more books. Sounds like a solid plan. But what about the bigger picture? How do we ensure that the lessons of the 20th century aren't repeated in the 21st?
That's where Snyder's final lesson comes in. Be as courageous as you can.
It sounds simple, but I imagine it's not always easy. What does he mean by courage in this context?
He's talking about the courage to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's unpopular or dangerous. The courage to speak truth to power. The courage to defend democratic values, not just for ourselves, but for future generations.
It's a call to action, isn't it? It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in safeguarding freedom.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even small acts of courage can make a difference. Think about the individuals we discussed earlier, like Churchill and Prikaroa. They didn't start out as heroes, but they made courageous choices in difficult circumstances, and their actions had a profound impact.
So what does this all mean for our listeners? We've covered a lot of ground here, and it can feel overwhelming. What's the one thing you hope they take away from this conversation?
I hope they come away with a sense of agency. You know, the challenges we face, both individually and collectively, can feel daunting. But as Snyder reminds us, we're not powerless. We can choose to be informed, to be engaged, and to act according to our values.
And in doing so, we can contribute to building a more resilient and democratic society.
Precisely.
This has been an incredible deep dive into On Tyranny. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I would just encourage everyone to read the book for themselves. It's a quick read, but full of insights that are incredibly relevant to the world we live in today.
Absolutely. It's a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
It serves as a powerful reminder of the fragility of freedom and the importance of defending it.
We've included a link in the description where you can purchase it. Honestly, it's one of those books that everyone should have on their shelf. Okay, so we've unpacked a lot from On Tyranny. It's a call to action, a reminder of history's lessons, but also a guide for navigating the complexities of our modern world.
You know, Snyder doesn't just offer warnings. He provides practical advice for building individual and societal resilience.
Right, like his point about corporeal politics, the importance of physical presence in action. You know, it's about getting out there, making connections, and actively participating in our communities.
Think about it this way. Have you ever felt more connected to a cause after attending a rally or volunteering for an organization? That's corporeal politics in action.
It makes me think about how easy it is to get caught up in online activism, where a retweet feels like enough. But Snyder argues that physical presence matters. It's about showing up, being visible, and making your voice heard in a tangible way.
He draws parallels to movements like the Solidarity movement in Poland, where people power took to the streets and demanded change. It's a potent reminder that our actions, even seemingly small ones, can have a ripple effect.
And that brings us to another crucial point, navigating the world of information overload and disinformation. Snyder urges us to be critical thinkers, to question the information we consume, and to be wary of emotionally charged language.
You know, it's more important than ever to develop those critical thinking skills. We're bombarded with information from all sides, and it can be difficult to discern fact from fiction, especially online.
Snyder even encourages people to step away from the internet and engage with books as a way to develop a broader perspective and cultivate a deeper understanding.
He stresses the importance of diversifying our information sources. Don't get stuck in an echo chamber where everyone agrees with you. Expose yourself to different viewpoints, even those that challenge your own beliefs.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. The same goes for the information we consume.
Exactly. We need to be proactive in seeking out diverse perspectives. That's how we develop a more nuanced understanding of the world.
Okay. So we've talked about the dangers of tyranny, the importance of defending our institutions, the power of individual action, and the need for critical thinking. What's the one message you want our listeners to walk away with today?
I think it's this. Be as courageous as you can. It's a simple message, but incredibly powerful. We have a responsibility to defend democratic values, not just for ourselves, but for future generations.
And that courage can manifest in many different ways, from speaking out against injustice to simply being more mindful of the information we consume and share.
Exactly. Every act of courage, no matter how small, contributes to a more just and equitable society.
Well, this has been a truly thought-provoking deep dive into On Tyranny. If you're feeling inspired to learn more, we highly encourage you to check out the book. We've included a link in the description where you can purchase it. It's a short read, but packed with insights that are incredibly relevant to the world we live in today.
It's one of those books that stays with you long after you finish it, and it's a powerful reminder of the fragility of freedom and the importance of defending it.
Couldn't agree more. And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to Mindful Moments for more thought-provoking content like